All right, so on Tuesday, we went through project 1-1 as just a really quick example, and I kind of pointed some things out to you. We're going to go through, and this is SolidWorks 2017. We're going to kind of start that over because, first night of class, you want to see something, kind of know what you're getting into. When you get the software downloaded, kind of have a direction. We're going to go over the major components that you're looking at. So the pull down, if you don't have the push pin, you just have the flyout arrow, then I would recommend, at least initially, go ahead and hit the push pin. What that's going to do is it's going to give you the pull downs for all of these information. So everything that I've generated in the way of files, the help. As we open up the parts, we're going to have additional commands that come into play. If I can't find it in the command manager, which we'll get to, if I can't find it somewhere conveniently, it will be in the pull down. If I still can't find it, I can come up to the search and have it search directly to that command. So again, probably too many ways to go find something, but you have it available in front of you one way or the other. When you first launch, then we have the standard toolbar for the open, saves, prints, the all-important rebuild. And there are two rebuilds, and I believe it doesn't give me the hotkey, but I want to say it's Control-V, or sorry, B as in boy, is kind of a just go ahead and rebuild. A Control-Q is rebuild everything regardless of where you think it's at. Start at the beginning, rebuild all of the geometry. So there's a lot of times where I'll Control B and I'll still get a little stoplight or something in the system. A Control Q will usually force that rebuild all the way through. Let's see, then the file properties, that's kind of another file, and don't have anything open, so there's no properties. That's why that one's grayed out. And then we go to the add-ins. We're going to deal with the options when we start looking at the templates. And if you've been through the other videos, you've seen that there is a lot of information going on in the options. So we'll just briefly jump over to the add-ins. So with the student version, you should have all of these fun things to look at. So SolidWorks is an electronics integration, being able to go back and forth from, I was going to say Eagle, no, right on the tip of my tongue. Nope, missed it again. Anyway, the PCB board layouts, the masking software, being able to put components, make the traces, have it go back and forth and communicate with the electronics. FeatureWorks will take a translated file, so if we're not running 2018 yet, FeatureWorks, we would bring in a Parasolid, we'd bring in an IGES file. And I want to make some of that geometry native back into SolidWorks. FeatureWorks will allow me to pick individual geometry or pick the whole thing. It works pretty well on prismatic shapes, but you get into the curvy, ergonomic, wavy, it's gonna choke. PhotoView 360 is now soon, well, maybe somewhere in there, the photo renderer. The new photo rendering should see on your desktop SolidWorks Visualize. Visualize is the newer, and it operates mostly standalone from what I've seen. Scan to 3D at the professional level will take up to, last I checked into it, was 50,000 points. If you've done any scan, 50,000 points is probably about a square inch. Doesn't really give you much of anything. Scan to 3D at the premium level is unlimited. Design Checker is if you set up a company standard, Design Checker will check your documents against that company standard. Motion, basic dynamics, being able to graph torque forces within your basic animation, basic motion. The PDM client, I have the client installed, and I'm still working on, since I don't always have a server handy, I'm working on putting the vault in into Dropbox, and having Dropbox be the go-between all of my computers. PDM is document management, and so things like revision control, naming conventions, approvals can go through PDM. There's now, instead of PDM Works, that was phased out last year. Sure, there's still companies using it. The SolidWorks PDM standard and the enterprise level then has a bunch more tools and an associated price tag to go with it. The piping and routing, or routing, will do things like flexible pneumatics, the hard plumbing. I'll show you some of the standard Schedule 40 piping and pump systems that I've worked on. Hydraulic systems, and then the electrical running cable bundles, or being able to do just basic layouts for the electrical. Simulation then is FEA, finite element analysis. There's multiple levels of simulation. So at the base level, you have Simulation Express, which will work on a part in basic through basic and professional. It does not do assemblies. In the premium level, you will be able to do a static simulation on parts, multi-body parts, and assemblies. And at the simulation premium and professional levels, then it goes into frequency, buckling, drop tests. There's 8 or 9 tests that you can do within the simulation to set those up. Yes.
Is there any simulation for fluid dynamics?
And then flow is, and let's see, because this is my commercial edition, on the student editions that you install, in the middle here, I don't think it's up top. It'll be somewhere in this list, put it that way. There will be FlowWorks. And FlowWorks is, since it's not here and we're talking about simulation, we'll go ahead and you have Flow Express. Come back to me, please. Here we go. You have Flow Express, which will work at the on a part. It assumes an interior volume and is limited to air and water. And it's still very functional as far as being able to look for those types of errors, or kind of the gross errors. The full FlowWorks is a library of just about every fluid, wall conditions. It ties into the simulation, so if you have heat transfer and thermal capacity going into the system as a simulation, then the FlowWorks takes those into consideration while it's pushing the fluid through your system. Yes.
Simulation. You said you can make frequency. What do you mean by frequency?
You can look at the natural, how do I want to put it, kind of the natural vibration of your part. So if I have a piece of aluminum and I have a piece of carbide, and I run it through a simulation or a frequency simulation, I will see a higher frequency for the aluminum and a much lower frequency for the carbide. And that way, it's just returning a value of if we're expecting, maybe it's a road condition, we're bouncing down the road, and at a certain speed, we know that there will be frequency. Yeah, I'm getting out of my element here. You can go back to the.
The reason why I asked is because I know a lot of.
Okay.
The other reason why I was asking about if I made like something that needed frequency to shoot at it, doesn't do that.
No, it's going to return a value and say this is where it's going to produce a harmonic, or this is where it's going to give you.
Exactly what I was asking.
Right.
produce a harmonic.
In this range, it is going to vibrate. It's going to have a natural vibration. I've only done a few of those, and it's been kind of, the whole garbage in, garbage out situation of most of the time I really didn't know what I was looking at. I was like, oh, that's a really cool number. What does it mean? Unless I had some data coming back that was useful that I can compare it to. It was more of a project example than it was anything that I used useful. Going to the Toolbox Library and the Toolbox Utilities. The library is our database of fasteners. So socketed cap screws, hex bolts, nuts, washers, pins, and in whatever 20 some odd world standards, however you want to contend with it. And then there are more buried, embedded in the database that they don't turn on, which I think is, it is a little overwhelming, but not knowing how to go in and set up for an ultra fine, an extra fine thread that isn't currently in the database, that's something that we'll cover, is getting into that database a little bit, seeing if a thread form or something is in place, and then being able to activate it or create it. The Toolbox Utilities are kind of a set of calculators, but probably the most useful is O-rings and external rings. Being able to put in ballpark geometries. I still verify my O-rings and my external rings against manufacturer, but it gives me a good starting point. There are CAM calculators, there are beam calculators, there's life cycle calculators in the utilities, so we'll take a look at those. The SolidWorks Utilities as a whole is usually comparing documents. All right, I have two drawings, I have two revisions of a drawing. I can't really tell what the differences are. It will show me the differences between two parts. It'll show me the differences between assemblies. It will, I can set up the parameters to say this drawing has these dimensions. This is what has changed between those two. The workgroup PDM. I think that was the previous. Let's see, we got the client. It's got the same thing. Tolerance analysis is in conjunction with DIM Expert and in net effect with that model-based definitions. Once we've set up the conditions and the tolerances within DIM Expert and those go over to the assembly, we can generate reports on stack up of tolerances. What are the min-max conditions? What is the worst case scenario for our systems? I think my frustration with tolerances analysis is that I haven't done it enough to be fast at it, and most of the time I can look at those parts and do the math in my head faster than I can set up. So I usually end up just sitting down and kind of scribbling out and go, okay, worst case scenario, I'm going to have 2 thousandths of clearance or 2 thousandths of interference or whatever it is that I'm analyzing for those parts. But we'll take another stab at it. AutoTrace is a very basic raster to vector conversion. I would recommend Adobe Illustrator. I would recommend, what is the eMagic? Now I'm going to have to look at it again. Maybe it's on here. Don't look at something for, Magic Tracer. I don't look at something for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and poof, gone. 30-second attention span in effect again. All right, AutoTrace is not the greatest. It will work, but if I have better choices, I'm not even going to look at AutoTrace. It's something that either SolidWorks is just kind of patched in there so they could say they had it, but they really haven't done enough with it and don't really seem to support it. So you can try it. There are some videos on how to go through and have it recognize the hard edges of your JPEG, your PNG, your graphics files, but there are certainly better programs that do a lot better job. The SolidWorks Forum, and then one of the reasons that I'm showing you this is because SolidWorks Forum will be checked on check to the on condition automatically, and it will show up and it will add to your launch time. If you have a system that is a little on the slow side and it's taking 30 seconds, a minute to load, it's showing here less than a second, but if it's accumulating information, I've seen them up around 5, 6, 10 seconds. So that would be one that, unless you're going to read the forums regularly, turn off for the active, and then also turn it off for the startup. Active is for this session, and then startup is going to be for every time you launch. The SolidWorks PCB for 2017, I haven't seen that one. I guess I just completely overlooked it, but printed circuit boards, so something going on with the interface, something for me to search and figure out what they added. I didn't pick it up in any of the what's new. So 3D control is the Logitech 3D mouse. So if you are interested in the 3D mouse or have a 3D mouse, that is going to be the control interface. 3D mice are nice for doing large assemblies and when you're doing a lot of modeling. The problem is when you don't have it, it will be that automatic response of reaching for something that's not there. It's kind of one of those, you get used to it. If you're interested in one, I'll plug it in and we'll take a look at it when we have some models to work with. All right, so the HSM Helper and HSM Works are CAM programs, and those are through Autodesk. That is pretty much what we're going to start off with in the GTC 276 class. Mastercam 2017 for SolidWorks is also a CAM package that lives inside of SolidWorks. There is no standalone component on this software or on this side. And the CAM is producing toolpaths for CNC for machining. And then the one that's not on here, well, I haven't overloaded the system yet, so maybe I'll go ahead and put CamWorks on here too, since 2018 SolidWorks is going to have a CamWorks Express. The 3D Experience, kind of the shortcut, I believe that's the shortcut to the SolidWorks portal. And I haven't used the XPS driver in a long time, but basically if you're not using it, turn it off. All right, it's telling you what the load times are and what the that hit to, you go to launch and it's sitting there doing all of those things. If you're not using it, don't need it, just go ahead and uncheck it at startup, and next time it won't look for that module. All right. On then the search commands, if we do a little pull down arrow, showing, didn't even know it was going down to all of those fun things, but pretty much the search commands showed you on Tuesday that if I didn't know where to find the line command, I could type in line and it would take me immediately to that command, put it into the property manager, and be ready to go. Usually it's the more obscure commands that, do I want to go to the pull down and then to another fly out to another fly out and try and identify where that location is. Then the standard, if you have dual monitors, this will span monitors. There's usually another icon up here to span the monitors, minimize, maximize, and then of course close the program. And then the taskbar flyout is resources, documents, being able to get to some of the shortcuts. We talked a little bit about the toolbox. Toolbox is inactive because I am not in an assembly and I have not turned it on. So those are kind of my two conditions to do the fasteners and the hardware, is I have to be in an assembly and then I have to activate that module. On the other side, the design library is available, and I can create parts and put in the library that I'm using over and over and need to have access to. Content Central is kind of a catalog of vendors, and it will take me out onto the internet. If I know who the vendor is, I can go see if they put their product online, and why would I build it if they've already provided one. All right, so whole locations, mounting locations, I would really want to pull from their information. Under the SolidWorks content, probably the one that's most useful is the weldments, and the initial install for the weldments. So anything that's a structural steel, structural aluminum, is going to have a profile that we're going to be able to place onto a 3D sketch and build frames, and kind of go into some of that. Say kind of a secondary operation. That is a fairly limited library. So if you're interested in weldments, come to the content, go to weldments, download and extract the ANSI inch, and you will get much more weldments. Weldment profiles. So we will, towards the end of the semester, spend a part of a class going through creating a weldment profile, generating some geometry. So I think that was that one. View palette works inside of the drawings. The appearances, scenes, and decals. So let's start off with I don't like my screen background. If I look down through here and I find one that I do like, I can right-click on it and say set as the default scene. So when I go into a part, when I go into an assembly, that screen background is going to be one that I picked. To a certain extent, it'll also be, does the graphics card support the real view? Is it trying to render on a constant basis? My preference, if it's still down here, if I didn't fly by it, plain white. That is my default scene, or should be. If not, it is now. All right, so we'll take a look at where it tells me what that default scene is, but it's not one of those readily apparent, trying to remember what the default is, otherwise, I want to say one of the 3 points. So it has some shadows and some other things turning on. I like a very simple background. If I'm going to be staring at this for 8 hours a day, I don't want a lot of colors. I don't need the disco items. I don't need the flash and the glitz. I want something that I can actually stare at for a while and not burn my eyeballs out. Otherwise, the appearances, most of these will come in with the material. And so we'll spend more time with the material database than we will with the appearances. But the nice thing about appearances is that we can change those appearances in the assembly and not affect the original part. So it is kind of nice to be able to go in and make some color changes, make some of those selections. So for instance, if I wanted a brick, I could put a texture of a brick on something. And then the last one was the decals. So on Tuesday, I showed you the gallery with the Sierra Mist and the Dr. Pepper bottle, and those were in the 2014 advanced class. If you're interested in seeing how those were created, scanned that label, made it a decal, and wrapped it around the bottle, sized it, and photo rendered it. All right. Next one down, custom properties. Probably won't have any. Yep, not going to have any for our. Part needs to be opened. Part assembly and drawing can all have custom properties. So since the drawing will populate, we would go to File Properties, or under Custom Properties, we can set up a little interface that will have some selections, have some logic built into it, that we can put in part numbers, that we can put in finishes, things that we would want to track, and have it right back to the file properties so that each part carries that metadata with it. And then when it goes into the drawing, that's what populates our title block. I shouldn't have to type one thing into my title block because I put it all into the part. I put it all into the assembly, or most of it anyway. And then the PDM interface, hopefully I'll get that working, but checking out parts out of the vault, checking them into the vault, and then going through those basic controls. At the bottom is our status bar. Oh, there's my taskbar, but the status bar, and then we're ready to open something. You know, when you see this splash screen, it's saying, tell me what to do. What do you want? So we can do the Control N if you like hotkeys. You can do the file pull down new. You can do the new icon. And if I guess that one's just pull down. I mentioned on Tuesday that if you see the novice screen, 3 choices, these are going to the defaults. They do not give you a lot of choices as to what you would want to select. All right, so I'm going to bypass this screen and go into the advanced. Advanced has then the templates that I've either created or modified from the default to have the things that I like to see on the screen, the things that I want to work with. So I kind of leave the standard templates as an option. So if I completely bugger one of these things up, I have something to go back to and try again. All right, so I'm going to select a part inch. Well, let's go with the just the template part. I won't go into my template just yet. We launch, and because I kind of scrunched the screen a little bit for the capture, little tighter than what I'm used to. It still brought up all of my heads up, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, so we kind of went around the screen. We come back, and depending on which module we're in, our 3 modules again are parts, assemblies, drawings. We're going to have different command manager toolbars. So I don't want to see my cam right now, so I'm going to uncheck cam. I don't want to see sheet metal, so I'm going to uncheck sheet metal. And that just opens up a little more screen space. I'm only going to use those tabs when I need them. All right. They're also available under, well, inserter tools. I've got a 50-50 shot at it. So sheet metal, if I just had something quick to do with sheet metal or weldments or the mold tools, rather than turn this on, I could jump into it, do whatever I needed to do with it, and then not necessarily have to turn on the tab. All right, so the tabs are going to be for the features, everything we create with the features. These are going to be active because it says you can create an extruded boss, you can create a revolved boss, and it will ask you to sketch some geometry to create those. Everything else needs multiple sketches or existing geometry to work. So as we're going across, everything that's grayed out is grayed out because it's not going to let us play until we have something to play with. All right, and then reference geometry is going to be things like the plane, the axis, coordinate systems, and a point feature, which is not the same as a sketch point. Curves, curve through XYZ points, helix and spirals. There's also like an Excel file curve. There's a couple different ways. I mentioned that Instant 3D should probably be turned off. Now, if you go ahead and if you click on it, it'll be highlighted, and then when it's turned off, it's just background. And then I think I added the cosmetic thread because cosmetic thread, or no, not cosmetic thread, the thread function. All right, so I got those two confused. So the thread function, which did it make it up here somewhere? No. Now I'm going to have to go look for it. Thread. Oh, I went to HSM. So it's probably going to be the once the geometry is created and available there. Anyway, rather than doing a cut sweep, there is a thread feature now that does a pretty decent job. They've gotten the bugs worked out since 2015 or 2016 when it was introduced. So we will take a look at those. All right. So first thing is we're going to make a sketch. Yes?
Is that hard drive on copy?
My hard drive.
Yeah, it's hard drive.
Yep. The sketch then, and basically I'm going left to right, but our workflow is really to go to the sketch first. And then from the sketch, we're going to create object geometry within the sketch. And then that's what's going to become our feature. This is where all the rules, this is where all of the relations, this is where all of the do's and don'ts start to come in, is in this group on the command manager. So all of our basic sketch selection is 2D and 3D. Please stay away from the 3D sketch. If you do the pull down and you happen to grab a 3D sketch, let me go ahead and do that real quick. Doesn't look too much different until I go to sketch something, and then I get this. And as soon as you get that, and it can do that, you don't want to be in a 3D sketch. All right, it's a whole different set of rules. It has additional relations. We will cover 3D sketches later on, but try to avoid it. All right, so if I just click on sketch, that's going to put me into the to the sketch. Since I did not pre-select, I am big on pre-selecting. All right, so since in this case I did not pre-select a plane, it's going to ask me. And most of the time it's going to be the front plane. Not always, but we go into the front plane. And I had my origin turned off, so when this comes up, instead of seeing a blue origin, I'm going to see the red origin. Always go back to the short leg is horizontal, long leg is vertical. If I rotate completely around, and we'll do the mouse buttons here in a second, if I rotate completely around and get lost, I will still be able to see the short leg is horizontal, the long leg is vertical. I'm going to do the control buttons real quick. Control 1 through 8. Control 1 is the front, 2 is the back, and that origin is going to flip around as we go. Left, right, top, bottom, isometric. Normal to has to have a selection. So if I picked a face, if I picked a plane, it would go normal to that face. So let's see, if I go to the right and do a control 8, that took me normal to the right plane. And then whatever sketch I'm in, control 8 will take me back. You can also go to the reference triad and navigate around in the triad. While we're in the screen, we'll go ahead with the heads-up display. I have more because I like things in the heads-up display. I've added those. When we get to customizing, we will customize and put those items in. And then over on the right is this will close the part as opposed to closing the program. We have the maximize, minimize, and tile right, tile left. I think that's with the dual monitors, and since I'm connected to the, that should be duplicate, not extended. Okay, I don't know what it's doing. Okay, it's going to kick it over, and so if I have multiple files open, multiple parts, multiple assemblies, to be able to tile through those. And then the confirmation corner is to accept the sketch, go in or out of the sketch, and then the X is to exit. I think I have mine turned off, but it will typically ask, "Are you sure?" When you get tired of it asking, "Are you sure?" say, "Don't show again." And the plus is it doesn't ask you again, and the minus is it doesn't ask you again. You hit that X and you weren't ready to, it's going to close. It's going to close that sketch, and you're going to lose whatever it is. So it's kind of one of those. It's nice to have that safety net of having it show the "Are you sure?" So let's see if mine. Oh, it does. I didn't click the "Don't show again" yet. So if I click that box, I won't get this warning of discard changes and exit or cancel. I want to go back into the sketch and accept it, save it. Let's see where we're going from there. All right, so our sketch tools, line, you do not have to do the pull down to get to the line. Whatever was used last will remain active. All right, so if I was in a center line and I close, let's see, will it stay in the center line? Nope. That's probably the one that's a good example of a bad example. Circle, no. Arc is probably the best one. So if I go to a tangent arc, then it will stay in tangent arc until I tell it to select something else. So line, circle, splines, more complex geometry. You will see the plane icon come up, be active. That will put you, look at its description, inserts a plane into a 3D sketch. We don't want to do 3D sketches just yet. Corner rectangle, different types of rectangles, 3 points. So again, whatever was active last, that will stay active. Arcs, ellipses, text, straight slots, which is kind of a macro. It treats it as a block or an object. The polygons, sketch fillets, and sketch chamfers, and then points. Points are handy, but they don't have a lot of uses. We're going to do predominantly lines, circles, arcs, for the majority of our geometry to start off with. Trimming entities, since the contours and regions have become more functional, or I understand them better, I hardly trim anything. I don't ever extend anything. I can drag it to extend it. I don't need I can't think of the last time I used extend entities. Convert entities will take existing geometry and convert it as object geometry into my current sketch. And the intersection curve is a way of generating surfaces. If we have surfaces, we have intersections of planes of surfaces. I can find an intersecting curve inside of a 3D sketch again. Something we're not ready for. So most of the time we'll just convert entities into our geometry. Offset, just what it says. Do we want to go one direction, both directions, or basically, what do we say, left, right, or both? Mirroring entities, a couple ways to mirror entities, but I am really fond of symmetry. And we have a lot of symmetry in our parts in our assignments. So where we can identify symmetry, I can do half the work and still get a full part out of it. I'm all over that. Line sketch patterns, circular sketch patterns. If you've gotten into Chapter 2 or a little bit in Chapter 3, you've learned to be frustrated by sketch patterns. They will get you most of the way. They will get you geometry, but you're going to have to add one or two relations, a dimension, usually some other little thing to get it to go fully defined. So they're kind of annoying that way. And we don't have any geometry to move, or it's not even gonna let me do the pull down. We can move, scale, rotate our sketch geometry. Don't use that one too often, but it is handy when you need it. Display, delete relations, and add relations. Well, adding relations is pretty much automatic. We're going to just stay with display, delete if I'm diagnosing, if I'm looking for specific relations. Shouldn't have to repair sketch too often. That's more of an imported. I brought in a DWG file. It had gaps. It had issues. There was something that was messed up in the translation. Then I could repair the sketch. The quick snaps are typically always on, but things like the snap to point, snap to midpoint, because those are automatic and visual in the background, we really don't do a whole lot with those. Rapid Sketch and Instant 2D are another one of those. Leave them off. Rapid Sketch will open up a sketch on any face that you select. So you select a face, you're in a sketch. You do whatever you're going to do, you extrude it out, you hit OK, you select another face, you're in a sketch. I don't like being in a sketch every time I select on something. So unless you are just really, you've got the next 4 or 5 sketches lined up, you know where you're going, what you're going to do, and which faces to select, I think you will find that one to be more annoying than useful. Instant 2D, kind of the same as Instant 3D, lets me drag geometry around. The Modify Sketch is one that I added, and Shaded Sketch Contours. Let's go ahead and turn that one on so while I'm drawing you can see. I think this is on by default, and I want to say that I had to go find it. So Shaded Sketch Contours, and if you want to add that to your toolbar to turn it on or off, you can. I believe I drug it directly out of this pull down into my command manager to get it there. So I'll show you what that one does, because it's another one of those love-hate relationships. You either love it or you hate it. There's not much in between. All right, any questions? So again, I know this is an avalanche of information. You're going to see these. You're going to start using them, and concentrate on the ones that you recognize and move into the ones that you need as you need them. On the left then here is our design tree. This is history-based program. So I create a sketch. The sketch creates a feature. That feature is my base feature. Its parents are the planes and the origin. I create another sketch, then that first feature becomes a parent and the second feature becomes a child. And the rule is I can't put the parent before the child. All right, I can make changes so that it doesn't have those relations and update it, modify it. But if I'm thinking far two or three far enough ahead, that is only going to happen every once in a while when I manage to paint myself into a corner. So feature tree, top is the part. First one is the configuration. Second one is the display state. Both of those are useful pieces of information. They don't mean anything to us right now. As far as the dynamic reference, the little lines that pop up showing you those parent-child relations, again, you either love them or you hate them. There's times where I want them on. I want to be able to see those relations, but I really don't want to see them all the time. So if I go to Sketch, it shows me, hey, that's on the front plane. That's really good to know. Now I can turn it off. All right, so dynamic reference and parent and going to the child. All right, so those are both right clicks. If you haven't gathered yet, well, we've only done a few of this one on the videos, but from Tuesday night, this is pretty intensive right click. All right, so the right mouse button, whatever you're hovering over is going to have a context menu that is fairly specific to whatever it is that you were hovering over. Sensors we're not so much worried about, but I can set a sensor that says if this part gets over 500 grams, warn me. The problem is going to be, oh, got rid of that, lost that. Okay, go away. Thank you, Windows. All right, so since I lost my my feature tree, notice that there is this little box with a bubble that is going to expand in, expand out. So if you need a little more screen space, you can do the fly in, fly out. What was the other one? Oh, it have to come back to me. Anyway, so as far as the sensors, the problem is that once I get to that 500 gram, it's going to tell me every time it rebuilds, every time it sees that it's over 500 grams, I'm going to get that warning. So there's not a way to really pause it and say, okay, I know it's over 500 grams. I'm working on it. Give me a chance to fix it. It just keeps coming up and saying over 500 grams. The design binder is a embedded Word document so that you can take notes, you can grab screen snapshots, you can kind of make a documentation trail of your part. And so there is my journal.doc. It needs Word. Annotations, mostly on the right mouse button, display annotations. Turned off will not show anything underneath it. Feature dimensions, reference dimensions, and dim expert annotations are kind of the standards. I'll typically show reference dimensions, but again, display annotations has to be turned on for even those to show up. And if we just do the expansion, any notes that I put out of position on maybe I've rotated to a certain location. I want to put a note. It will add a new annotation, say plane or an annotation view, so that you can return to that view and set the see the note normal to its view. Solid bodies is not normally turned on. I'm going to recommend that when we do the options that you turn solid bodies on. Solid bodies lets me know it will activate as soon as I've created a second solid body. So I draw a circle over here, I extrude it. I draw a circle over here, I extrude it. Here's solid body number 1. Here's solid body number 2. And they don't have to be connected. I can connect them later, or not at all. All right, but since that only activates as soon as that second body comes into existence, then it will activate. Well, there's some functionality in there that I would like to see before that point, or may use before that point, so I go ahead and turn that folder on. Materials. So right now we're not specified. We don't have anything to apply it to anyway. Standard materials that we would use. Manage. Oh, didn't want to manage the favorites, but oh yeah, I guess that'll work. It took me right out to the favorites, but let's see the properties. Oh, if it did that, then let's go to a copper alloy. We'll look at, and so it's going to give me all of the mechanical properties. Under the appearances is going to show me what it looks like, what the crosshatch will look like in the drawing, anything custom, data, and do I want it to be part of my favorites. There are going to be some custom materials, and since this is now 2014, 15, 16, the fourth time that I've installed SolidWorks on this, I have three custom materials, one from each one to get to this point. So instead of a 6061 T556 whatever, I want just a well, we did a diamond plate. Oh, this was the A53. Let's see if I can find it. No, the plastics. I guess that one gets installed. So this must have been the one that I created. And miscellaneous. Cast aluminum, custom plastics. So since if we go to aluminum alloys, you're going to see 6061, and okay, so there's the alloy, and then stress strain is a special type, T4, T6, kind of go through the list. So which one? Well, usually I end up making custom materials for like white Delrin, black Delrin, Cetal plastics. All right, so we'll deal more with the materials a little later on. Front plane, top plane, right plane, origin. All right, so they're all kind of showing up there. And then we're back to the sketch. Across the bottom is the model. And then the motion study is what activates the animation, the basic, are we going to rotate this? Are we going to zoom it in and out and make some graphic over it? Also, once the add-in for motion will work out of that particular motion study as well. Across the bottom is current position on the screen, so you see those numbers kind of jumping around. My current status is underdefined, and the status of the sketch is editing the sketch. And then we come over to inch, pounds, and seconds. Had this question on Tuesday, so and there's my unsaved document. So it's been 20 minutes since I saved anything, which is to say that I haven't ever saved it. So it's giving me the warning. It'll stay up for 5 seconds and then it goes away. I go to inch, pounds, and seconds, and we do the fly out. I can switch to millimeters, grams, and seconds, but watch what happens. I have a red, and I have the confirmation corner, which are my indicators that I'm inside of the sketch. Go to millimeters, grams, and seconds, gone. And since there was nothing in the sketch, it's gone too. Not surprising, but it's gone. All right, but I am in millimeters, grams, and seconds at this point, so that was the desired result. If I wanted to stay in inch, pounds, and seconds, I can switch it back because I'm not in the sketch. I don't see anything. So we'll do that again. So I'm let's see. Before I did the sketch and selected my workflow, and again, my fingers know what I want to do before I know what I want to do. So the front plane, right click, very top left icon is sketch. That's going to be the fastest way to get into a sketch and start your geometry. So when I hit sketch, I've got the red origin back. I've got my status bar, and pretty much ready to start drawing something. Finally, yes.
So the last sketch you were in, it deleted it?
It was an empty sketch, and when I closed it, it said empty sketch, no reason to save it.
And then, but this one will still say sketch 2.
And so it is going to increment as it goes along. Even if I go back and rename this to sketch 1, the next sketch will be sketch 3. Okay. And I'm not that particular about names. We can name the sketches, we can name the features, but I kind of put that into the retirement. You know, if you want to retire on this part, then name everything, give it a novel of a description, and and then pretty much nobody will ever look at it anyway. So naming features and naming sketches is a lot of busy work. There are places where I rename, but it's because I did something out of the ordinary, something I want to remind myself of. Hey, pay attention to this, because if you delete it, you're going to inflict a world of hurt on yourself. All right, so let's see. Any questions before we actually draw something? All right. All right, so we're going to do this again, and we're going to do it in, let's see, lines. Yeah, we can do this as lines or rectangles. It's not really going to matter. So a couple different ways of approaching. So if I do this as the line, and I went through that way too quick. All right, so I go into the line command. It comes up to the property manager. Oh, those were the ones I jumped over. Was property manager, configuration manager we'll get to, the DIM expert manager, or the list of DIM expert values that we've applied. The other side of the appearances is the display manager, and then since my HSM is running, this is my CAM manager. Really what we're interested in is the feature manager and the property manager. Property manager comes up automatically when I tell it to create an object. Create a line, here's the properties of that line. All right, so we're going as sketched. I don't have to worry about for construction, infinite length, or midpoint. We're just going to start to draw. And our first rule is something has to be connected to the origin, whether it's dimensions, whether it's a relation. If I just go line, and I am, again, a click dragger, sorry. I click and I drag. If you are a clicker, then you would go click, as opposed to, and then it stays continuous, which is probably why I click drag, is I'm not super fond of the continuous. And I just hit Control Z to back up through those. Control Z is your friend, always. Except for the one time that it goes back to the very first object in your sketch because it just had a hiccup in it. Since we have an object on the screen, let's do the mouse button. So when I hover over and I'm just hovering, that is going to be orange. It's highlighted. It shows me the midpoint. It's ready to be selected. When I actually select it, it turns to blue. So again, a lot of visual clues going on. Hovering over it again, the midpoint shows up. The little blue line underneath the arrow is telling me, yep, that's a line. You've selected it. And when I hold down the middle button or the scroll wheel, that is my rotate. See if I can remember these. Holding down the control button in middle is a pan, and the alt is rotate about the plane that you're in. Rather than rotating in 3D, rotate. I'm not doing a very good job of that. So Yeah, another one of those good example of that example. But rotating within the plane that you're looking at. So let's try that one more time with it. There, no. So coming around and rotating. So you do have those control combinations, control and alt combinations to make that work. And then of course the right mouse button is there's a few relations, there's some of the common commands, and a list of things that I might want to use. All right. So my visual clues on the screen. I have an endpoint, and then connecting them is the actual line. So even though there's one object on the screen, there's actually three elements that I'm looking at. All right, so when I grab the endpoint, it's going to rubber band, and then this is where we're going to start to see those inference lines. The blue dashed line says that I'm horizontal, I'm vertical, and if I place it at that point, then it's not really going to produce a relation. It's just there. All right, it's something that I can do something else with. But I really want to relate this back to the origin, so since I didn't drop it onto the origin to begin with, I can drag to the origin, and my icon is going to change to, in this case, coincidence, and the little blue dot, and that gives me a relation. So coincidence is this endpoint and the origin now share the same location. All right, and then the parameters are XY position of 0 and 0. Typically, I would say use the parameters for reference. If you are coming from an AutoCAD, Autodesk background, your tendency may be to want to put in those values. These values do not add relations. We really want to leverage all of the horsepower of those relations, and parameters don't give that to you. So if it's going to be a problem for you or something that you kind of fall into the habit, go ahead and just suck that one up. Hit the little caret so it disappears and you don't even see it. Then it's not in your frame of reference. And then as far as the add relations, when you see the anchor, the fix, we don't fix. There are few and far between rare times when we do, but 99.9% of the times we do not fix. My very favorite example was a project that everything was entered as parameters and all the endpoints were fixed, and you might as well redrawn the whole thing rather than try to make change one. It was miserable. I'm sure it was miserable to create, and it was miserable to work with and modify. All right, so back over to the relations. My endpoint here is, kind of can see it has gone to black. All right, so that's telling me it's in a defined condition. I highlight the line, and I can either go to the pop-up and make horizontal, or come over to the add relations and select horizontal. Because up to this point, I grab the other endpoint. This is rubber band. I can still move, go anywhere. I haven't applied enough relations to get it to go fully defined. Highlight the line, tell it to go horizontal, then only the endpoint moves. And at this point, until I put a dimension on, and dimension falls into the category of a relation, until I apply that dimension relation or just apply the dimension, that's going to be free to move. All right, so I did a click drag. I'm going to do a click click. And because it's continuous, I can go to the next one and then either hit escape, or I think it was A. And then alternatively, we'll go click and drag just so you can kind of see the difference. And I'm inferring those relations as I go. The little yellow lines are showing me where horizontal and vertical are. And when I get to the point, and it's now showing me concentric, coincident, concentric, it's basically going to merge. It's showing me that the line is vertical and that it is concentric, and the relation that I get is vertical. And because those 2 points, I'm not really going to see a relation. They pretty much merge, which merge does not have, there is no merge relation. It just happens it's there. We would have to trim it out, delete, and redraw it. As soon as we enclose that volume, or that area, sorry, it's not a volume yet. As soon as we enclose that area, it's now a shaded sketch contour. If you like the shaded sketch contour, leave it on. If you don't, turn it off. All right, I haven't gotten quite used to it. It is interesting, or if it happens to go to an overlapping condition, it shows you the dark intersection and two lighter not intersecting areas. All right, so it gives you some feedback of what you've created. All right, so I'm not quite used to using that yet, and we'll see how it looks on the video before I stay with it. All right, ready to put in the dimensions. 3 ways of putting in the dimensions. Let's go with the select an object. When you click on an object, it shows you the dimension, and then it's still moving around. It's really needs to find a home, place it. As soon as I click in the area, in the work area, it's going to ask me for a value. I put in the 5 inches, have the 5 inches. I decide I don't want that dimension there. We can still move it. I can position it. I can find it, any number of locations. It's not set. And as the sketches become more complex and get a little uglier, we're going to want to reposition those. But you're drawing for convenience. You're sketching for convenience. When we go over to the drawing, then we'll make it pretty and we'll put the dimensions that make sense for manufacture. The next dimension technique will be between 2 objects, and that was 3 inches, and okay. And then the last one, this is going to create an overdefined condition. I already know that, but we'll illustrate it. I go from point to point, and when I place this, I do have that one set to not show. All right, because that one does annoy me when it comes up and says, you have an overdefining condition. So this one, notice that these extension lines are darker. This one went right to gray. And when I select on that dimension, we have its values, we have its tolerance, we have additional text that we can add, we have symbols that we can put into it, justification. On the leaders, what do I want it to look like? Probably more useful for the circles and arcs. And then we get over to other, and there is my driven dimension. If I uncheck that, now I have an overdefining condition. Comes up and says item is unsolvable, item conflicts, and then I see a bunch of things in yellow or red or brown or pink, and everything has kind of a different meaning, different connotation to it. So my choices are to return that to its driven state or to select it and delete it. Either one will work. You are going to overdefine some sketches. It's inevitable, right? But it's the combination of relations, and you're building a hierarchy of. I've always related it to poker, and it's one of my my catchphrases is that you can have several hands that will will end up with the same result. Right? So if I have a horizontal and a dimension, that could be the same as picking the two endpoints, making it collinear to something, and having something else set the distance. All right. I don't necessarily always have to have a set number of relations or the same relations to get to the end result. Yes.
Why is overdefined a bad thing?
Mainly because it's yellow and red, and it's really annoying. The overdefined is a bad thing because you have created that conflict between the 2 dimensions. So let's say we go back. One of these has to have priority. One of these wins. If you have both of them, how do you know which one to modify to update your model? And then it's going to come up with a little yellow explanation point, and it's going to warn you whenever it rebuilds that there are errors, and it just considers it an error, and it's kind of a pain to deal with, so make it go away. Yes?
What is the shortcut you use there to go back?
Control Z does the undo.
And the other way.
On that one, I was hitting delete on the keyboard. So let's go undo, and I hit delete on the keyboard once it's selected. or you can right click on it, and down here somewhere, which I hardly ever use, is the delete. That will make it go away as well. So again, multiple ways to kind of go through and find the ones you like. Yes.
Those relations, the little green boxes, if you have them already, how do you...
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. So that means that the sketch relations are on. And for 4 lines, not a big deal. We get into more complicated sketches, they're going to start to take over. I called them gremlins on Tuesday, and I think that's probably the most apt description, is that they start out cute and fuzzy and then they take over. So under the hide show items, make sure that you're picking the down arrow, right? And then on the lower left, it'll be sketch relations. Or under the view, and now that I've done that enough, it's gotten harder to find. And then sketch relations here at the bottom, which is just behind my my screen. If you pick on the hide all types, then everything gets grayed out. Well, except for the sketch relations. Imagine that. So we turn that one off, and then I can turn the hide all types back on. 2017, they started this with that little dual functionality. So stay to the arrow side on the hide show. So if you want to see them, turn them on. If you don't want to see them, turn them off. The my preferred workflow is that I will select that object, and that object's relations will come up for me. All right, circle, or pick the center point, and because I'm a click dragger, click the center point, drag out. If we did the click, it'd be pretty much the same thing, except it doesn't. It stays in the circle command, but it's not like a oh, that was the Control S, not the Control Z. And then how do we want to position this? All right, so to review from Tuesday, if I place a dimension, and we were at 2.75, and so dimensions on the circle. There again, I start into dimensioning, don't even think about it. So I'm going from an object to an object. And with circles, if you're used to AutoCAD, Autodesk products, they kind of point you towards the center points. We're going to go to the perimeters. We're going to go to the outside of the circle. And there's a very important reason for that. So when I place the dimension, and this one was the 1.5, then picking the outside is also going to give me my dimension. And I'm not sure what's going on with my graphics that I'm getting the mod diameter, but basically that should be the diameter symbol. So what ends up happening is that when I pick the extension lines for the dimension and come over to leaders, under the leaders, at the very bottom I have an arc condition, and my timer is just a little bit in the way, so let's go to max. I do not get max if I pick the center point. I do not get min if I pick the center point. I only get the center. All right? And so if I'm reverse engineering, if I have this part and I want to do a dimension from that edge of bottom edge of the circle to the outside edge, and I pick the center point, I have to do math. I don't want to do math. I have this great tool that says if I pick the circumference, if I pick the perimeter, it will do the math for me. I can take a direct measurement, I can enter it as a value, and it will show me the distance from that edge to that edge. So when this grows, the parametrics say everything grows with it, but these dimensions are driving. Right? They've taken. They're not going to let this move if the design intent is for the hole to always be centered. So I'm going to go ahead and delete, highlight, and delete. And notice that I'm selecting on the extension lines. For the longest time, we could pick the dimension. Now the dimension goes to. Oh, I'm going to make a liar out of me. Either that or I turned it off. That must have been one of the toggles. Goes to modify. All right, now I got to go find it. And if we're on the sketch, no, that still wasn't it. Nope. Okay, now I don't know what I turned off. Change something else on me. All right, but if the numbers change over to a modify box, then we'll click on the extension lines. So if I want this centered, I'll go into a center line. The difference between a center line and an object line is just that we have set for construction, we have set a toggle. Okay, so if I go from corner to corner, oh, there's the pop-up box for numeric input. And so I went coincident to the corner, coincident to the other corner, and just basically drop those points on top of each other. Same with the circle. I grab the center point of the circle and I drag to the midpoint. It shows me that little yellow box. That's my clue that when I drop it, it's going to automatically infer the midpoint relation, and that is going to define my sketch. So I mentioned the center line. If I click on the center line and I tell it I want it to toggle construction geometry, now I've created 1, 2, 3, 4 regions. I can leave this, but now I have to make additional selections when I create the extrusion. I don't really want to make those additional selections, so the other option is I could toggle back, or I can come over to the property manager, and under the property manager, go for construction. All right, now I have 2 regions, but because this is a singly nested objects or a singly nested sketch, meaning that I don't have anything inside of the first nest, this will extrude without an additional selection. All right, so we'll take a quick look at that. Oh, the other one was, now when I go to 8 inches, circle will always stay centered. And I can always delete the relation and go back and put in dimensions and change it, but I'm looking into my magic crystal ball of design intent and saying I want this to stay centered on this part regardless of how it grows or shrinks in the design. All right, so let's take a real quick look. Well, let's go ahead and do the contour region first. Well, all right, let's extrude. And so selected contours is not highlighted down here. So we're going to do a blind condition. We have other conditions that we can work with. We don't have a direction to make this kind of an oblong or kind of an out of position. And our thickness, I believe, was 1 inch. It shows me the preview, and I go ahead and accept, and I get my shape. If I go back in and edit, let's do one more here. I expand this out. I have this symbol on my sketch, which is just kind of the lines. We go back into the sketch. Ah, that was the one that I wanted to do. I'm right-clicking, and I'm telling it to either edit the feature or edit the sketch. And that's another one of those. My fingers are getting ahead of my mouth, so we'll back up a little bit and make sure that point gets made. If I'm on the sketch, I'm only going to see edit sketch. And the next one is edit sketch plane, which we'll talk about later. When I edit the sketch, that puts me into the geometry. I go back to that millimeters, grams, and seconds thing. It didn't delete this time because the sketch, the feature was there. It did, it had objects inside of the sketch, but it kicked me out. I'm back to my sketch. So to get back into it, right-click, edit sketch, and then I'll accept to get out of it. And if I go to the feature, first one is to edit the feature, which takes me back into the property manager for the feature. And because I changed over, I'm in millimeters now. All right. If I go back to the boss extrude and say edit sketch, that's putting me back in the sketch. So again, 3, 4, 5 ways to get into everything. Kind of pick the one that you recognize, that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with. I'm going to switch this back over to construction geometry, and we're going to see the error that it produces. And I know that it's now intersecting geometry, but we can show the problem. Multiple disjointed closed, cannot create the feature. So we go ahead and hit OK. It's showing me a graphics view of the area that has the problem, the line intersecting. We go ahead and close that out. This time I'm going to say, go ahead and exit. I'll take care of it. I get a nice red X over the top of my feature that says, you got a problem. everything's gone, fix it. All right, so I'm going to go back into that. Here's the explanation. I edit the feature, and then it goes to selected contours. All right, so real quick, we'll do contours and regions, and then we'll close up on this one and pick it up again on Tuesday. All right, so selected contours. All the rest of the settings stay the same. Contour. Contour is the outside. So if I did a contour, did it not pick? It should just do the lines that I've selected. One or more closed contours, self-intersect. See if it's going to allow that one. All right, so that's the first time I've seen it not take a contour. Usually it will find its way around the outside, the perimeter. So contours, and then regions are interior spaces. So if I wanted that for my shape, those are my regions. And because these are 0 thickness geometries, I now have 2 bodies. Extrude 1, extrude 2. All right, so to fix that, we're going to go back in. Oops, didn't want the sketch. Still didn't want the sketch. We'll clear the contours and regions, and I'll go region, region, hit OK. So it's okay that I left those intersecting, that overlapping geometry, but I had to make that additional selection. All right, now I'm back to a single solid body, have my geometry. All right, so we've gone a little long on the first explanation, but when you get the software installed over the weekend, or you're sitting down over the weekend, you know, you just seen in an hour and 15 minutes, there is a lot of terminology. There are a lot of visual clues. There are a lot of things going on. Your job is just to get familiar. This is not a sit down and start creating the next space shuttle. It's sit down and learn how to make a box with a hole in it, right? So take your time, get into it, pay attention to the relations, pay attention to what's making it fully defined, over-defined. Notice there's no minus sign, there's no red marks, there's no yellow explanation points. It's just the sketch, and the icon changed from that little sketch over to telling me that there was a contour and region selection. Doesn't make a difference which way we went with it. It just was, we went a different path on our decision tree. You're going to make lots and lots and lots of decisions. All right, 25 people in the class. Even though the box with the circle, it's kind of hard to get different geometries. But the way that you created the sketch, if I looked at the order, everybody would probably create it just a little bit different. Did you use the rectangle tool? Did you use the 4 lines? And all of those are fair game. Experiment, try it out. Don't be afraid to fail. Push all of the buttons, see what happens. Any questions? I would expect this video will make it up sometime tomorrow. So, watch, enjoy, cure your insomnia. We'll call that one good.